What do you say we get into the action, ladies and gentlemen? Already standing by, our first guest. He joined us a while back. He is one of the experts on bail bond reform. It's been something he's been very active in for a long time. As a graduate of Texas A&M, part of the system there. Phenomenal attorney, well-respected, well-known in the state of Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the show for just the second time, Ken W. Good. Ken, thank you so much for coming back on with us. And before we jump into anything at all, how are you today?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well. It seems like we're starting to turn things around and get back to law and order type issues.
Yeah. I mean, that it is such a culture shock for some of the folks, especially in and around the D.C. area, and then out towards the 9th District in particular for the U.S. Judicial District. It really seems like almost a whole different legal system. We were seeing some people still arguing up and down that it is not legal for the executive branch to exercise executive power. I'm still scratching my head on that a little bit, but maybe you can help cut through some of this minutia as we're at it. Trump has literally, it seems like we keep hearing it over and over again. He hit the ground running. He's going just bang, bang, bang. Not taking a break, trying to make sure that a multitude of actions are taking place. And he did that knowing there was going to be pushback. Rather than wait around for that pushback to happen, he keeps moving to the next realm. With what has happened so far between executive orders and efforts to get control of spending and really exercising the actual executive authority that belongs to the office of the president, what would, in your mind, constitute the most important thing that he's done so far? Or is that just there's no way to quantify a single most important?
I probably agree with, I think there was a presentation at the White House yesterday when they were saying that, in his first 30 days, he's probably already done 4 years worth of work. And I kind of agree with that. I think closing the border is probably very, very important, especially on the crime issues. I think the stuff that he's doing on deportation of criminals and has had a dramatic impact on crossings of the border. It sent the right message. And I think what is scaring his opponents is, I think that at the end of his first presidency, they were attacking him, and they've attacked him ever since, because they figured he would become a consequential president, a very consequential president, if he got to a second term. And they should have let him go to a second term 4 years ago, because he would have had a Democrat House, a Democrat Senate probably. He may have even been impeached one more time. It would have been very difficult to get things done. Now he's a man on a mission. He's treating it like he's taken over a bankrupt company, which is what he's an expert at doing. And he is putting a buzzsaw into waste. And so, and he's got both the House and the Senate for at least the next 2 years. So he's a man on a mission. I think the stuff he's done on the border, and also he's done some crime issues, and he says, we're back. And I think declaring war on the gangs and the cartels and branding them as terrorist groups is probably going to have a huge impact on crime as well.
Yeah, that certainly frees up a lot of additional options on the table to deal with something that more often than not local law enforcement just is ill-equipped to deal with. And unfortunately, due to previous administrations, a lot of federal agencies that ordinarily would be trying to intervene on behalf of the American public, probably not as well equipped as they should be either. I think what's really interesting, too, Ken, is the fact that when we look at this, it's not just Donald Trump, though. We see a lot of actions going on at the state level, at community levels. We see a lot of the American public that's kind of they're tired of the extremes that they have been subjected to. In a lot of ways, the point that you made is so spot on when you talk about how if they really didn't want to have to deal with what they're going to see now, they should have just went ahead and let Trump have his second term immediately after, because by having the snapback effect and seeing the direction that they want to go in, a lot of folks really began to realize that everything that was being said about Donald Trump and by extension those that support them is really kind of what they're doing to everybody. The level of judicial warfare, I've never been so blatantly obvious. And so a lot of folks that typically would even vote Democrat have kind of come around. We're seeing all kinds of reforms being put to votes and being led by voter initiatives in places you wouldn't necessarily expect, like New York, Oregon, and California, Colorado. That's a pretty serious impact, too. And we need somebody that's serious about the reforms in order to make this stick. How much have you seen this be the attitude in Texas, and how much is this appreciated by those in the legal field, at least the folks that you interact with on a regular basis?
Well, the Texas Senate passed out in the last couple of days 4 major bills on criminal justice reform, bail reform, that are strengthening the system. And they passed out of the Senate with maybe 2 or 3 votes against them. And I think the lieutenant governor is daring the House or challenging the House to pass them. And so one of those bills is a constitutional amendment to say that if you are charged with a felony and you're here in the country illegally, you're not eligible for bail. So we got a lot of strengthening of the criminal justice system measures coming through the Texas legislature, and we need more of that. I think as we move forward, as the majority of the country returns to law and order policies, we know what works. We've just been told for 4 years we can't do any of those. So as we return to those, and still in our urban cities, we have these Soros DAs that are going in the opposite direction, even with the public not supporting it, because that you see that in California, what's been going on for the last 6 months. In preparation for Gascon getting defeated, he was the LA DA who was supported by Soros. They started filing lawsuits against police jurisdictions and doing consent decrees, which are nothing more than settlements. And what the effect is, they've got a plaintiff and a defendant who are like-minded agreeing to put handcuffs on the police in those urban areas so that they can't do what they're kind of enacting the policies of Gascon through a consent decree. And so as we move forward, those places are still going to have high crime, and the rest of the country is going to become more and more of a dramatic comparison as they return to normalcy. And it's going to be devastating, I think, to one side of the electorate if they don't change course, because what they're doing is not working, and they're doubling down. And you can see that in what's going on with that party. A lot of what's been going on, the backlash that we should have had 2 years ago on crime, immigration, it was delayed because of 2 things. They were censoring the press, and then number 2, the Supreme Court ruling on abortion kind of overcame those issues. And here we are 2 years later, and they didn't overcome them this time. And so the backlash will be worse because the backlash has been artificially kept from happening. And because of the delay, it'll be a lot worse this time, I think.
Yeah. That's normally how it tends to work out. Ultimately, given your expertise in bail bonds area and the fact that the left kind of drew a lot of power trying to push back against the idea that some penalties were too harsh for the crimes that had been committed. Now, they like to throw other factors into, claiming racial bias and other things where maybe it was present in some cases, maybe it wasn't in others, but they like to paint with a broad brush. Let's get to brass tacks. I mean, ultimately, harsh sentences are created in order to try and deter unwanted actions. Has harsher sentencing been an effective deterrent in the past? And if so, can we find a happy medium where we don't go too far? Or are we in the middle of just a pendulum swing? And unfortunately, as you know, again, when a pendulum is pulled back, it tends to go just as far in the other direction when the time comes. So it would be difficult to land in that medium spot. But what are your thoughts in that particular area?
I think we're repeating the same mistakes that we made in the 60s. In the 60s, we felt safe, so we were more forgiving on our criminal laws. Crime started going up, and then there was a lack of an agreement between the two parties on how to address it at the national level. One party refused to participate in the debate. As a result, we started, things started getting worse. And really what changed things was the minority communities, the pastors in those areas started calling for reform because they saw the damage that was being done to the minority communities. That is what's going on again. We're repeating the same mistakes. The difference this time is that the mistakes, and we now know with all the spending that's been just abused and people that were giving money by the U.S. aid groups, that all these groups that would have had a backlash a couple years ago were receiving, probably a lot of them were receiving funds. And also, I think probably the biggest damage we have this time on the backlash is we've been through this period of time where we don't know who to believe. I mean, we have this organized advocacy groups that part of them has all these pseudoscience reports that they issue, and they say, don't believe the police, don't believe their numbers on crime, which historically those are the numbers that are most accurate. And so now we're being told we can't believe what the police are telling us, and so the public doesn't know who to believe. And I think that we've been through that period, but some of these reports that they've issued have all kind of concluded, well, crime's not going up, the FBI statistics prove it because the FBI statistics are going down. Well, that all was blown sky high in October when it was discovered that the FBI statistics had changed and suddenly showing that crime was going up. That was, and they're still incomplete. I wrote an article that was published in U.S. Attorney magazine right at the 1st of October saying, here's all the reasons why you should question the FBI statistics. And then 10 days later, it was discovered that they had changed, and they were now showing crime had increased. So that blew completely out of the water all of these pseudoscience reports, studies, everything that had been done by these groups to say crime was not increasing. And suddenly now they're reaping the rewards, the punishments for all those years of those crazy reports.
Yeah, and I think you're actually being very kind and very diplomatic in calling them pseudo science reports, because in reality, I think this was an intentional misleading in order to push the agenda forward. Again, I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, ultimately, we had influences from outside organizations. I'm going to say the name of a big boogeyman here. Some folks get a little nervous when I say it, but we had folks like a certain George Soros individual that was funding a lot of DAs, and the only criteria that he really needed to be supportive of them was that they wouldn't actually enforce the laws. We saw this effort to not just lessen potential punishments, but to try to do away with them altogether if you check certain boxes. And those boxes usually meant if you were a repetitive.
They had 4 different groups that they were all coordinating their actions with. They had one group that was seeking soft on crime candidates. Then they had the second group, so they'd give them money, and they would go to areas where after the primary, whoever won would be the victor. And then the second group would invite them to seminars after they were elected, and they would give them the policies that they wanted them to enact. And it became a quid pro quo. So you're no longer going to seek enhancements. You're no longer going to seek long sentences. It was a long laundry list. And then they had a third group that would give these crazy research studies that would say all of these things that you're going to enact will not increase crime. And then the fourth and final group was essentially like a PR firm that's giving them the press releases that will sell these new policies to the public. So, I mean, it's been a very coordinated effort. And, you know, I used to say they could have been well-intentioned. They were going to start out in the Democrat areas, and then as it became successful, they were going to take it to the more conservative areas. But I don't think that anymore because it's been such a stunning success, and they're doing everything in their power to continue to push those very harmful policies, because the people they say they're wanting to help are minorities. Those are the communities that are getting harmed the most. And so they have I believe they have a different motivation. And since the law enforcement is the largest single budget item in the county, and by reducing it, they are moving those funds to their social programs. And then when they come back and have to hire more police because of crime, they're not cutting those social programs. So I think the purpose has really been just to move money from the number one budget item to their social programs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's just one motivation among many. There are certainly forces that are not at all happy with America as she was founded. They don't like our judicial system because while it may not be perfect, I've yet to find the system that is. It probably is about as close to perfect as you're going to get as long as all the pieces are functioning properly. That's probably the other piece of the equation that's ongoing, because we have seen communities starting to push back. We have seen a leadership from the federal government now trying to reestablish what is basically still just multiple prongs on reestablishing public safety. You have to crack down on illegal activity to make all communities safer. You have to control the border. All these things are designed in order to increase public safety, and it's not going to be a snap your fingers thing to fix. But now, in the effort to do so, we're starting to enter the phase of legal lawfare where judges that are activist and ideological are starting to push back. What do you ultimately see moving forward as far as how the legal challenges to what Trump is ongoing and to what certain communities are trying to do ultimately shaking out if people stand firm and continue to fight this to their normal conclusions instead of having to give up midway?
Well, I want to start with before the election. So, you know, what they were doing, I mean, if you take a step back, you could say all of the lawfare they put Trump through was Biden's sole strategy for getting reelected, because he was going to have Trump convicted, declared a convicted felon, and then his thought was the Republicans would all run from him, and then once they ran from him, then it wouldn't matter what Biden's mental state was, because then the Republicans and the Democrats would reelect him. But that failed and failed miserably. So now all the lawfare you're seeing take off right now, I don't think it's about winning. I don't think it's about being successful. It's all about Trump's got 4 years to go, so it's to delay as long as possible. And I would say the lawsuits are so poor, are so bad, even the leftist judges that they're handpicking, while they may be issuing a TRO, they're not doing anything after that. A TRO is not appealable, but a preliminary injunction is. So you've seen multiple judges in the last week where they issued a TRO, but when it came time to issue a preliminary injunction, they didn't. And then the ones that are getting the biggest headlines, they're just issuing an injunction saying follow the law, which is clearly not is not proper under the law. So I would say it's all about delay. It has nothing to do about success.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right too. Lots of times, unfortunately, the process is the punishment, and they try to make it as painful and as expensive as possible when they utilize it that way. But in my mind, that has to be so disheartening to the legal profession, the folks that are actually still in it for the purpose of trying to reach justice, and that really concerns me. Now, we're quickly running out of time, and I want to give you an opportunity to have a closing thought and to share any websites you'd like and all that good stuff. But before I do that, I have one more question that I have been asking, and you can give me a super quick answer if you want to. But every attorney I've had on since then, does the 14th Amendment guarantee birthright citizenship to illegal aliens in this country?
Oh, okay. So the amendment has two parts. The first part is that you're born in the United States, and the second part says you're not subject to the jurisdiction of another country, or you're not subject to another's jurisdiction. So an argument can be made that when you come to the United States from another country just to have a baby, that provision doesn't apply to you because you already are subject to another country's laws. The amendment was enacted because we had slavery. We had generations of slavery at that time. So we had a whole society of people who had been born in the United States and had been here and probably had children and grandchildren here, and they didn't have anywhere else to go, and they were not subject to any other country's laws. And I think that's the crux of the argument on the side that says it doesn't mean the way it's been interpreted. I think the biggest argument on the other side is it's been interpreted for many years that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United States. So the biggest obstacle is it's just the years and years and years of interpretation. And what are we going to do about that? I just want to thank you for having me on once again. I mean, these are so important issues. I'm very hopeful for our future. I've always been hopeful, even at the darkest hour, because what they're doing is not sustainable. I mean, you can see. I mean, Gascon lost by 20 points in the November election. California currently only has one Soros DA in the entire state. I mean, so they're on the run. They're not giving up because they have so much money, but they're on the run. If people want to know more information about me or my group, you can go to pbtx.com. We have a blog where we highlight important stories in the criminal justice world from our perspective. And also we have our own podcast that's called The Bell Post. You can find it either on our menu or you can just go to thebellpost.com, and all we do is talk about criminal justice issues.
All right. Well, again, thank you so very much for coming on with us. Great conversation. We need to get together a little more frequently, though. Just way too big of a gap between today and your last visit. Godspeed to you. Keep up the great work, sir, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that, of course, is Mr. Ken W. Good. We'll have links in the show description for the podcast.